Sir, you're being accused of disturbing community harmony on private property. That's what the police officer almost stated before I presented my ownership documents from 19... You see, this Barbara had been terrorizing our entire Pelican Bay community for 18 months, filing complaints against anyone who dared exist without her written permission. She threatened legal action demanding $90,000, submitted fabricated environmental reports to government agencies, and even attempted bribing county officials to revoke my permits. Here's the plot twist nobody anticipated. She had absolutely no awareness I was the legitimate owner of the $750,000 oceanfront mansion she was currently renting. Picture this: dawn breaking over Pelican Bay. The smell of salt water mixing with morning glory flowers. Wind soothingly. Flashing blue police lights start strobing across my grandfather's vintage beach cottage. Gravel crunches under tires as 2 squad cars pull up. And there she stands, Barbara Wellington, positioned on her mansion's deck, wearing a bright pink bathrobe and oversized sunglasses, pointing at me like I'm some criminal mastermind. The morning sun glinted off her manicured nails as she gestured wildly. What would you do if someone called police on you for fishing on your own beachfront property? Let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? I bet half of you have your own homeowners association horror stories. My name is Julian David Martinez, and 4 years ago, I thought I'd found paradise on earth. After 23 exhausting years working emergency medicine and surviving a brutal divorce that felt like being run over by a legal steamroller, operated by my ex-wife's merciless attorney, who charged $500 per hour, I inherited my grandfather, Eduardo's beach cottage on Pelican Bay, California. Population 3,800, where the biggest controversy used to involve Mrs. Henderson's tabby cat stealing fish from neighbors' docks. The cottage represents nothing extravagant, a 1965 craftsman structure sitting on 3 acres of heaven. Every morning I'd wake to pelicans diving into water, walk onto deck boards worn smooth by 45 years of California weather, and breathe air so pure it erased memories of 23 years breathing hospital disinfectant. The place smelled like my childhood, aged cedar mixing with sea salt, and that metallic scent of ocean spray at dawn. For 3 perfect years, Pelican Bay earned its name. 47 properties scattered around 8 miles of shoreline, mixture of locals and summer folks, everyone following one rule: wave when you see each other, help when someone's in trouble, and mind your own business the rest of the time. Then catastrophic Hurricane Barbara hit our peaceful community. She aggressively purchased the absolute biggest architectural eyesore on the entire bay. An ostentatious $850,000 Godey McMansion that looked exactly like someone had carelessly dropped a suburban Atlanta house directly into the Minnesota woods by helicopter accident. Within her very first week of residence, she'd personally introduced herself to roughly half the Bay residents by expensive custom golf cart equipped with leather seats and chrome accessories. Consistently wearing those blindingly bright white designer capri pants and colorful cardigans bright enough to successfully signal Loafland commercial aircraft, her jewelry jangled with each movement, sweet as artificial chemical sweetener on the carefully polished surface. But her calculating eyes remained cold as harsh January lake ice, constantly evaluating and judging everything around her. The specific morning, absolutely everything changed. Forever started like any other peaceful day. I was sitting peacefully on my weathered dock with steaming coffee that tasted like pure liquid peace and contentment, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of orange and pink, when I suddenly heard the aggressive low rumble of an absurdly overpowered pontoon boat violently cutting through the morning calm like a screaming chainsaw massacring delicate silk fabric. The birds scattered, and the peaceful atmosphere shattered instantly. "Yoo-hoo, hello there, neighbor," Barbara's shrill voice carried across the peaceful water with all the genuine warmth of a harsh tax audit notification letter. She deliberately pulled up to my private dock, wearing a practiced smile that would have made any used car salesperson tremendously proud and jealous, her boat bumping against my weathered pilings with unnecessary force. "I'm Barbara Wellington from the executive estate directly across the bay." "Executive estate? Good Lord. The pretension was suffocating. "I'm here conducting official HOA business," she announced dramatically. Producing an expensive manila folder, with the exaggerated theatrical flair of a dramatic game show host revealing grand prizes to excited contestants, the Pelican Bay Homeowners Association has officially voted on comprehensive, updated aesthetic standards. During our last board meeting, and unfortunately your rustic setup isn't adequately meeting our strict community guidelines and requirements. I set my ceramic coffee mug down so hard, it rang against the wooden rail like a warning bell, the sound echoing across the water. "What homeowners association, exactly?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the anger building inside. Her plastic smile cracked just enough to reveal perfectly whitened teeth that probably cost more than my boat. "The one that diligently protects our collective property values from declining negative influences and maintains community standards. That aluminum boat has got to go immediately, and frankly, the fishing gear scattered around makes the whole area look like a bait shop exploded in a hurricane." My supposed declining influence was a Lunday fishing boat that had caught more fish and created more happy memories than her fancy floating living room would ever accomplish. The scattered fishing gear was actually my grandfather's meticulously hand-carved rod holders, each one a work of art, and a treasured tackle box, considerably older than she was, filled with lures passed down through 3 generations. "Lady, this particular property has been in my family since long before you were even born," I said firmly. "There's absolutely no HOA covenant on my official deed, and there sure as hell won't be one added now or ever." The mask slipped completely, her voice dropped instantly to Arctic temperatures, the fake sweetness evaporating like morning mist. "We'll definitely see about that specific situation, won't we, Dr. Boy?" The condescension dripped from every word. She violently gunned that pontoon engine like she was desperately fleeing an active crime scene, sending a massive wake that slammed into my dock forcefully enough to spill my coffee and rock the entire structure. The smell of burning gas and expensive perfume lingered heavily in the morning air like a direct threat, mixing disgustingly with the clean pine scent until it made my stomach turn. As I watched her speed away, leaving chaos in her wake, I felt my jaw clench. As I watched her massive mansion's windows, glinting brilliantly in the sunrise, like a predator's calculating eyes watching potential prey, that old familiar military instinct kicked in powerfully. The specific one that kept me alive through 3 dangerous deployments before medical school. The instinct that screamed danger. This wasn't simply some neighborhood dispute over minor issues. This was absolutely war, pure and simple. And I had the deeply sinking feeling I'd just been involuntarily drafted into a conflict I never wanted. 5 long days later, I discovered an official envelope taped securely to my front door like a parking ticket from hell. Inside was the most elaborate piece of fiction I'd witnessed since my ex-wife's completely unreasonable divorce settlement demands that tried to claim half of everything, including my grandfather's inheritance. Pelican Bay Homeowners Association violation notice, blazed across ridiculously expensive letterhead in blood-red letters that seemed to scream authority. Apparently, I owed them $750 for a failure to maintain dock aesthetic standards, and had exactly 30 days to comply immediately or face substantial additional fines and potential dangerous property, liens that could jeopardize my ownership. The document looked impressively official, with elaborate seals, complicated case numbers, and even professional legal-sounding language that would make most regular people immediately panic and write a check without question. Too bad it was worth considerably less than the expensive paper it was printed on, but most folks wouldn't actually know that important fact. Time for some serious reconnaissance work, I decided. The Cedar Falls courthouse basement smelled distinctly like aged leather and broken dreams, where dust motes danced slowly in harsh fluorescent light like tiny ghosts of bureaucratic nightmares past. The walls were lined with filing cabinets that seemed to stretch endlessly. I'd learned during my army days before medical school that the absolute best intelligence always comes from the specific people who've been filing papers considerably longer than you've been breathing. These were the people who knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. So I made friends with Dorothy, the 70-something county clerk, who'd seen everything during her career. Another association victim? Dear, she murmured, pulling out my property file with hands gnarled from decades of filing but moved with practiced efficiency. That Wellington woman's visited here 9 times this quarter, asking repeatedly about lien, enforcement procedures and foreclosure time. Between you and me, honey, she doesn't know her rear end from her elbow. About actual property law, it's all bluster and intimidation. My deed was absolutely clear when Dorothy spread it out before me. No covenants, no restrictions, no HOA authority whatsoever. But here's where my old logistics training kicked in powerfully. Always check what the enemy is really doing while they're distracting you with paperwork theater. Barbara's Pelican Bay Homeowners Association existed, all right, incorporated 18 months ago, with exactly 12 members out of 47 Bay properties. In legal terms, they had about as much authority over my property as my neighbor's Oran Tabby cat. But while cross-referencing ownership records with Dorothy's help, something made my internal detector start screaming loudly. Several waterfront properties had recently transferred to Wellington Holdings LLC. A quick online search revealed the truth. Our self-appointed HOA queen was running an unlicensed vacation rental empire, turning quiet family cabins into party houses for Twin Cities tourists who didn't respect the community. The woman lecturing me about community standards was the one actually destroying them systematically. I remembered something my grandfather Eduardo used to say repeatedly while teaching me about life. Before you fight City Hall, make absolutely sure you know who actually runs the city and understand the power dynamics at play. Smart man with decades of wisdom. He'd also taught me patiently that most county records are public information freely available. Property ownership documents, business licenses, covenant restrictions, all searchable online for absolutely free if you know where to look. Amazing what you can learn when you actually do your homework instead of just threatening people blindly. Armed with this crucial intelligence, I decided to test community sentiment with some strategic social media reconnaissance. Facebook might be where brain cells go to die slowly, but it's also where you discover who's really paying attention in your neighborhood and who's willing to speak up. My post was simple and direct. Has anyone else received violation notices from the Pelican Bay HOA, asking for educational purposes only? My phone exploded like a 4th of July fireworks factory. 8 different Bay residents sent private messages within the first hour, each with their own detailed Barbara horror story that made my blood boil. She'd been systematically working around the Bay, like some kind of legal intimidation tornado, threatening elderly widows over bird feeders, young families over mailbox colors, and retirees over garden gnomes. The stories were remarkably similar, showing a clear pattern of harassment and intimidation. Janet, a retired librarian with organizational skills that would make the CIA weep with envy and jealousy, had been documenting everything meticulously in a 3-ring binder with color-coded tabs and cross-referenced entries. Tom from the marina shared digital photos of Barbara's bounced checks and unpaid fuel bills totaling over $3,000. Even 90-year-old Florence chimed in with detailed observations about unusual late-night activity at Barbara's supposed family rentals, including loud parties that lasted until dawn. I created a private group chat called Pelican Bay Truth Squad because if you're going to fight crazy with documentation and evidence, you might as well lean into the comic book drama and make it interesting. The name stuck, and soon we had regular members comparing notes and sharing information. That evening, as the sun set over the bay, painting everything in shades of orange and purple, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Barbara's voice oozed through the speaker like honey mixed with industrial solvent and barely contained rage. "Julian, sweetie, I saw your adorable little Facebook post this afternoon," she purred with false sweetness. "You're making this unnecessarily difficult for yourself and creating problems you can't imagine. Just asking questions." "Barbara," I replied calmly. "Neighborly curiosity and community engagement. Nothing more." "Oh, honey, you really don't want to go down this particular road with me." "Trust me on that." Her voice dripped with condescension. Her voice dropped to that special threatening tone that certain people use when they're about to destroy your credit rating and make your life miserable. "I have connections you couldn't possibly imagine at the county and state level, and I will absolutely report you to the appropriate authorities for harassment, cyberbullying, and creating a hostile environment." The line went dead abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering seriously what kind of connections a vacation rental scammer actually thought she had with local law enforcement. As evening settled peacefully over the bay, I sat on my dock, listening to the gentle percussion of waves against weathered wood, breathing in air that still smelled gloriously like freedom and fish fry from someone's dinner. The sunset painted everything gold and orange, including the Truth Squad members' houses scattered around the shoreline like fortress lights in the gathering darkness. Barbara had made one critical tactical mistake that would prove to be her downfall. She'd picked a fight with someone who actually knew how to gather intelligence before going to war, someone who understood strategy and patience. If Barbara thought Facebook drama would scare me off, she clearly hadn't done her homework on military veterans who'd served in combat zones. We don't retreat from bullies. We adapt to circumstances, improvise, and occasionally overthink everything until 3 a.m. while planning 17 different battle strategies and contingency plans. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I was ready. The next morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain, which seemed perfectly appropriate for what was about to unfold dramatically. I was enjoying breakfast on the deck when I heard the distinctive crunch of official government vehicles on gravel driveways. A white truck bearing county code enforcement emblazoned across its side pulled up to my property like it owned the place. Out stepped Tom Henderson, looking less like an enforcement officer and more like a man who'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Tom was about 50, with the exhausted eyes of someone who'd spent decades mediating ridiculous disputes between unreasonable neighbors fighting over trivial matters. "Morning, Mr. Martinez." He sighed heavily. "Got a complaint about unpermitted dock modifications and possible environmental violations regarding wetland encroachment." Before he could continue with his rehearsed speech, I handed him my property file complete, with grandfather's original 1978 permits, recent county inspection certificates, and environmental clearance documents all organized in plastic sleeves. Tom's eyebrows rose considerably as he flipped through pages. "This is the most thorough documentation I've seen in 20 years, he admitted with genuine respect. "Let me guess the source of this complaint." "Wellington's." His expression confirmed everything. "Between you and me," Tom said quietly, glancing around to ensure we were alone, "that woman's filed 23 complaints in 7 months against various properties, most completely baseless and without merit. She's costing taxpayers thousands in wasted investigation hours." That's when Tom let slip something extremely interesting that changed my entire perspective. Last month she offered him consultation fees to expedite certain violations against properties she was interested in purchasing at reduced prices. He'd reported it immediately to his supervisor as potential bribery. Barbara wasn't just playing HOA dictator for power. She was running a systematic scheme to devalue properties, force desperate sales, then flip them as vacation rentals. Brilliant, evil, and completely illegal on multiple levels. "Your dock's perfect," Tom concluded, closing his official inspection report with finality. "I'll note in my records, this complaint was unfounded and appears to be part of a harassment pattern. You might want to document everything carefully." As Tom drove away, I noticed Barbara's silhouette in her mansion window, binoculars raised, watching like a hawk surveying prey from her elevated perch. The woman had absolutely no idea. She'd just handed me ammunition that would eventually destroy her entire operation. That afternoon, the Truth Squad held our first official strategy meeting at Janet's cottage, which smelled wonderfully like fresh coffee and old books. The kind of place where smart people made smart plans. 7 of us gathered around her dining table, spreading documents and evidence like generals planning a major campaign. Janet had created a comprehensive timeline documenting Barbara's systematic harassment pattern across 18 months. Tom from the marina contributed financial records showing Barbara's consistent pattern of writing bad checks, then threatening legal action when merchants tried collecting debts. Florence shared security footage from her doorbell camera, capturing Barbara placing fake violation notices on doors at 3 a.m. like some deranged regulatory tooth fairy. The pattern was undeniable and criminal. "We need to go legal," I suggested firmly. Document everything meticulously, file formal harassment complaints, and force her to defend her actions in actual court where evidence matters. But we also needed to protect vulnerable community members who couldn't afford to fight back against frivolous lawsuits. That's when Janet revealed her secret weapon with a triumphant smile. Her nephew worked in the county assessor's office and had noticed something extremely suspicious about Barbara's property taxes. She was claiming homestead exemptions on 3 different properties simultaneously, which is spectacularly illegal and constitutes tax fraud. The woman was living in one mansion while renting out to others as vacation properties, but claiming primary residence benefits on all 3 to avoid paying proper commercial taxes. We were building a case that would make prosecutors weep with joy. That evening, as storm clouds finally broke and rain drummed against my cabin roof with rhythmic percussion, I received an email from Barbara that would become critical evidence. Subject line: Final warning and legal notice. The message was 3 pages of threats, demands, and thinly veiled intimidation written in purple font. Because apparently nothing says serious legal document quite like purple Comic Sans font, she demanded I remove my boat, repaint my cabin, her approved shade of beige, and pay accumulated fines totaling $14,700 within 10 days or face property liens and potential foreclosure proceedings. The email included attachments: fake architectural review board decisions, completely fabricated environmental impact studies, and even a threatening letter from her attorney, who I later discovered had been disbarred in Minnesota for similar fraud schemes. I forwarded everything to my own attorney with a simple note: please advise on harassment lawsuit. His response came within an hour, much faster than typical lawyer response times. This is the most clear-cut harassment case I've seen in 30 years of practice. Document everything. Don't respond directly to her, and let me handle this professionally. Also, you might want to contact the district attorney about the bribery allegations. The rain continued falling as I sat by the fireplace, watching flames dance while plotting my next strategic moves. Barbara had escalated from neighborhood nuisance to actual criminal activity. And she'd made the fatal mistake of putting everything in writing with electronic evidence. In the military, we called this giving the enemy enough rope to hang themselves completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet containing one sentence that made me smile broadly. Channel 7 News wants to do a story on HOA abuse. Interested? Sometimes the best defense is a really good offense, and sunshine is the best disinfectant for corrupt schemes. Tomorrow, Barbara Wellington was about to discover that threatening people who actually know how to fight back was a really bad strategic decision. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to hit her fake empire. As I drifted off to sleep that night, listening to rain on the roof and waves on the shore, I felt that old familiar calm before major operations commenced. Tomorrow the real battle would begin, and I was absolutely ready for whatever came next. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Thomas Henderson from County Code Enforcement arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, looking about as enthusiastic as someone facing root canal surgery. His truck crunched across my gravel driveway with bureaucratic obligation. "Mr. Martinez, sorry to bother you, but I've received reports about dog violations and an abandoned vehicle," Tom said, looking embarrassed. The clipboard in his hands told me everything about Barbara's complaints. I poured him coffee that actually tasted like coffee, and we walked down to examine my dock. Tom measured everything twice, checked his clipboard, then shook his head like a man who'd wasted his morning. "Between you and me," he said quietly, "this is the 27th complaint from the same address in 7 months. She calls us more than my mother calls me." That's when Tom let slip something interesting. Barbara had tried slipping him a $100 bill last month, calling it a consulting fee. She wasn't just playing neighborhood dictator. She was testing the waters for corruption. That evening, the Truth Squad attended Barbara's emergency HOA meeting as observers. The gathering took place in her mansion's great room, decorated so aggressively it looked like a furniture showroom exploded. Only 7 people showed up, mostly property managers who looked miserable. Barbara had prepared a PowerPoint titled Protecting Our Community Investment with pie charts and photos of non-compliant properties. Janet took detailed notes, but the real intelligence came when she noticed Barbara kept checking her watch and glancing toward the kitchen. During the bathroom break, Janet followed Barbara and overheard a phone conversation. "I told you the payments are coming," Barbara hissed. "These people are more stubborn than expected, but I've got new strategies. Legal pressure, code enforcement, whatever it takes." The pieces clicked together. This wasn't about community standards. Someone was pressuring Barbara financially, and she was desperately trying to generate income through harassment. I'd seen this pattern in the military. People under extreme stress cross lines they never thought they'd cross. The question was, who was holding Barbara's leash? My answer came quickly. While researching her lawyer, the guy who'd sent the threatening letter, I discovered he specialized in foreclosure defense and debt collection, not the type you hire for neighborhood disputes unless you're drowning in legal problems. So I filed my own complaint against Barbara for harassment and filing false reports. Two could play the bureaucracy game. Then I went further. Using the property management company's contact info from the rental listings, I reached out to the actual owner of Barbara's mansion. Turns out Coastal Property Management was very interested to hear about their tenants' unauthorized business activities. Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez, who'd been tracking the pattern of complaints, pulled me aside after I filed my countercomplaint. "Off the record," he said, leaning against his cruiser while evening light caught the bay. "We've been documenting everything. Nothing criminal yet, but she's walking a very thin line, and we're watching." That night, sitting on my deck with the sound of gentle waves mixing with distant laughter from a family barbecue across the bay, I realized Barbara had made a fundamental tactical error. She'd assumed everyone would roll over like scared civilians. Instead, she'd accidentally united a community that had been quietly minding its own business for decades. The smell of charcoal and honest conversation drifted across the water. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tonight, the good people were winning. If Barbara thought code enforcement was her nuclear option, she clearly hadn't graduated to actual weapons of mass bureaucratic destruction yet. That honor was reserved for what happened at 6:30 in the morning, on a Thursday morning that started peaceful and went sideways faster than a greased pig at a county fair. I was enjoying my sacred morning coffee ritual. That first sip that makes you believe the world might not be completely insane, when the unmistakable crunch of police car tires on gravel shattered the bay's morning calm. Blue lights strobed across my cabin walls, and I could practically feel Barbara's satisfaction radiating from her mansion deck. Two officers climbed out of their cruiser, looking about as thrilled as mall security guards. The younger cop had that fresh-faced earnestness of someone who still believed every call was a genuine emergency. His partner, a grizzled veteran with sergeant stripes, clearly knew this was going to be another waste of taxpayer money. "Mr. Martinez, we've received reports that you're trespassing on private property and made threatening statements." I invited them inside for coffee because, honestly, if you're going to be falsely accused at dawn, you might as well be civilized about it. The senior officer, Sergeante Peterson, accepted gratefully. "Sir, we have to respond to all calls," Peterson said, settling into my grandfather's old kitchen chair. "But between you and me, this complaint doesn't pass the smell test." That's when I produced my secret weapon. Documentation, security camera footage, property deeds, the complete timeline of Barbara's harassment campaign, and even Tom's written statement about attempted bribery. I'd learned in the Army that paperwork wins wars, and this particular battle was about to get very one-sided. Peterson reviewed the footage of my supposed threatening behavior, which showed me helping elderly Florence load her fishing gear into her car, while Barbara lurked behind her mansion's windows, like some suburban spy, novel villain. The trespassing occurred on a public access road that had been public since before Barbara was born, despite the shiny new private property signs she'd posted overnight. "Ma'am," Peterson muttered, shaking his head at the footage. "Either you're the world's most polite terrorist or somebody's been yanking our chain hard." While the officers were reviewing my evidence, my phone rung. Dave Morrison, a private investigator who moonlighted at the local tackle shop, had finished the background check I'd commissioned. What he'd discovered would have made a soap opera writer weep with envy. Barbara Carmichael owed $52,000 in unpaid HOA fees from her previous community in Minneapolis. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a butter knife. She'd been sued by that HOA and lost, which explained her intimate knowledge of legal intimidation tactics. More concerning, she owed money to everyone from contractors to credit card companies, with a pattern of using legal threats to delay payments until creditors gave up or settled for pennies. But here's where it got really interesting. Dave had discovered that Barbara's rental operation violated 3 different zoning ordinances, none of which required business licenses she'd never bothered to obtain. The county had no record of her vacation rental business, which meant she'd been operating illegally while lecturing everyone else about community standards. The Truth Squad had grown to 17 Bay residents, each with their own Barbara horror story. Tom at the marina revealed she owed $4,200 in dock fees and had threatened to sue him for discrimination when he demanded payment. The hardware store owners shared security footage of Barbara ordering supplies, then disputing the charges with her credit card company, claiming defective materials she'd never returned. The pattern was clear as bay water on a calm morning. Barbara used legal intimidation to avoid paying legitimate debts, hoping people would rather write off the loss than fight her in court. Peterson finished reviewing my documentation and shook his head like a man who'd just realized he'd been hunting unicorns. Mr. Martinez, I strongly suggest you consider filing charges for filing false police reports. This lady's been using us as her personal enforcement arm, and that stops today. As the officers drove away, their tires crunching across gravel that now sounded like victory, I noticed Barbara's silhouette disappearing from her mansion window. The morning mist was rising off the bay, carrying with it the clean scent of pine and possibility. My attorney had scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning, claiming he had news that would change everything. Something in his voice suggested Barbara's house of cards was about to collapse in ways she never saw coming. The loons called across the water. Arthur Peterson had been my grandfather's lawyer since the 1970s, and at 17 he still dressed like he was arguing before the Supreme Court. His office smelled like old leather and cigars with law books stacked high. "Julian, you might want to sit down," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. "I've been reviewing your grandfather Eduardo's estate more carefully. There's something significant we missed during probate." He spread documents across his desk: property deeds, trust agreements, incorporation papers. "When your grandfather died 5 years ago, you inherited more than just the cottage," Arthur continued. "In 1987, he created the Coastal Bay Property Trust. You now own 60% controlling interest in a trust that holds 6 waterfront properties around Pelican Bay." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. 6 properties, including the $850,000 mansion currently occupied by Barbara Wellington. I'd been fighting my own tenant without knowing it. For 4 years, Barbara had been paying rent to a property management company that deposited payments into an account I never knew existed. The woman terrorizing me about property standards was putting money in my pocket monthly. Arthur pulled out a thick lease agreement. "Your grandfather was thorough. This lease includes clauses about peaceful enjoyment, prohibition of unlicensed businesses, and maintaining community harmony. Miss Wellington has violated 16 terms. The irony felt like divine justice. Barbara had been harassing her own landlord while falling behind on rent, operating illegal businesses, and disturbing other tenants. "How behind is she?" I asked. 3 months with late fees at 18%, Arthur replied. The management company was preparing eviction proceedings, but needed trust approval. "That's you." Barbara's desperate behavior made sense. She was about to lose her base for the rental operation. "Arthur, she doesn't know I'm her landlord." His face cracked into a smile. "Not unless she's smarter than her behavior suggests. I could evict immediately for violations, but that felt like winning through technicality. My grandfather taught me real power meant knowing when not to use it." "What do you recommend?" Arthur leaned back. "Give her one chance to make it right. Document everything. Offer mediation. Show you tried resolving things reasonably. Courts appreciate landlords who exhaust diplomatic options, but if she escalated, Arthur tapped the prepared eviction notice. 30 days to vacate for lease violations. Clean, legal, devastating to her financial house of cards. I walked out feeling like I'd been playing chess while everyone else thought we were playing checkers. The afternoon sun painted Main Street golden. Barbara Wellington, HOA dictator, had been paying her worst enemy to destroy his peace. Sometimes the best revenge is discovering you held all the cards from the beginning. The drive back felt different. I called Janet immediately. You won't believe what I discovered. I'm her landlord. I own the mansion. The silence lasted 5 seconds before Janet burst into laughter. This is perfect. Wait until the Truth Squad hears this. That evening, I sat on my deck, watching sunset paint the bay. Barbara's mansion stood across the water, windows reflecting dying light. Inside lived someone who had no idea their world was about to change. I didn't feel victorious. I felt responsibility. My grandfather had built something meaningful. Barbara had corrupted it with greed. The next morning, Dave Morrison called. Barbara's talking to a Minneapolis developer about selling rental client lists. She's trying to monetize everything before getting caught. The Truth Squad meeting felt like a war council. 17 residents gathered in Patricia's living room. When I revealed the landlord situation, the room erupted. Florence shook her head with satisfaction. Your grandfather was smart. He'd love this. Arthur suggested making the revelation public at the next town council meeting. Maximum transparency, maximum witnesses, no room for her to claim conspiracy. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. That gave us 6 days to prepare. Documentation, witnesses, evidence of violations. Over the next days, Barbara's behavior became increasingly erratic. She approached elderly neighbors demanding they sign statements supporting her HOA authority. Florence told her to pound sand using colorful language. Tom banned Barbara from the marina after she screamed at a teenage employee. The grocery store incident became legend. Barbara had a meltdown at checkout, accusing staff of overcharging. Meanwhile, I prepared for the council meeting. Arthur drafted a comprehensive presentation, property documents, trust agreements, lease violations, everything needed. Janet organized community documentation into a prosecutor's dream binder. Photos, timestamps, witness statements, all cross-referenced. Dave completed his background investigation. Barbara owed $52,000 in Minneapolis. Multiple contractors reported unpaid bills. Credit card companies were pursuing collections. The pattern was clear. Barbara used threats to avoid paying debts, hoping creditors would give up rather than fight. Tuesday morning, Barbara made her biggest mistake yet. She attempted to bribe County Commissioner Hayes with $5,000 cash to condemn my property as an environmental hazard. Commissioner Hayes immediately reported it to the district attorney. Attempted bribery of a public official is a felony. Barbara had crossed from civil harassment into criminal territory. When Arthur called with that news, his voice carried grim satisfaction. She's done. Even if we didn't have the landlord angle, this alone would destroy her. The district attorney wants to interview you as a witness. Wednesday evening, I sat on my deck one last time before the town council meeting. Tomorrow, everything would change. Barbara would learn the truth. The community would see justice. The sunset painted everything gold. Across the water, Barbara's mansion stood like a monument to hubris. Tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day. I thought about my grandfather, building this trust to help families enjoy the bay. He'd always said that character reveals itself under pressure. Barbara had revealed herself completely. Tomorrow, she'd face the consequences. Thursday morning arrived with storm clouds over the bay. Dark and threatening. Appropriate somehow. The town council meeting was scheduled for 7 at the community center. By 6:30, the parking lot was full. Word had spread throughout Pelican Bay and beyond. Inside, the community center buzzed with conversation. I recognized faces from around the bay. Some I knew well, others only in passing. But tonight, we were united by something bigger, defending the idea that communities should be built on respect, not intimidation. Barbara arrived at 7 exactly, flanked by her expensive Minneapolis lawyer. She wore a white power suit screaming authority. Her jewelry glinted under lights. She looked confident, even smug. She had no idea what was coming. The town council called the meeting to order. Standard business first. Budget discussions, permit approvals, usual procedures. Then the council president looked at the agenda. "We have a special presentation regarding property rights and community standards," he announced. "Mr. Julian Martinez has requested time to address the council." "Julian, you have the floor." I stood, gathering documents. Arthur stood beside me. Janet sat front row with the Truth Squad, all 17 representing dozens more who couldn't attend. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "For 14 months, our community has been disrupted by harassment, false complaints, and intimidation. Tonight, I want to share the full story." The projector screen lit up. The first slide showed my grandfather's cottage, peaceful and beautiful. "This is where I live," I continued. "Property in my family since 19. Then I clicked to Barbara's mansion. "And this is the property at the center of our story." I saw Barbara shift uncomfortably. She whispered to her lawyer. Next slides detailed the harassment, security footage of confrontations, fake violation notices, Tom's statement about bribery, photos of unlicensed rentals, Commissioner Hayes's affidavit about the $5,000 cash offer. The room was silent, except for gasps. People were seeing the full scope for the first time. Then, the critical moment. "Many have asked why I didn't simply pay fines or move away," I said. "Why fight so hard?" The answer is simple. I couldn't let someone abuse property they don't own to harass the person who does. I clicked to the trust documents. In 1987, my grandfather Eduardo created the Coastal Bay Property Trust. This trust owns 6 properties around our bay. Primera pa Aust, including the mansion currently occupied by Barbara Wellington as a tenant. The room erupted. People turned to Barbara, whose face had gone pale. Her lawyer grabbed her arm. "I own this property," I continued, voice rising. "I am her landlord. For 4 years, she's been paying me rent while harassing me, filing false complaints, attempting to destroy my peace. The irony is perfect, but it's real, documented, provable." Barbara had been attacking the person who provided her housing. Arthur stepped forward. "As legal counsel, I confirm these documents are authentic. Miss Wellington has violated her lease multiple ways. Unauthorized businesses, harassment of tenants, failure to pay rent for 3 months. We've prepared an eviction notice to be served immediately." Barbara found her voice. "This is conspiracy!" she shouted, jumping up. "You've all been plotting against me because I tried improving this community." Her lawyer tried quieting her, but she was beyond control. "Primera Abe writes, I've done nothing wrong. These people are liars. Council President, I demand investigation." The president looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, these are public documents. Trust records are filed with the county. Your lease is legal and binding. Unless you have evidence of conspiracy, consult your attorney quietly." Barbara's lawyer got her to sit, but she shook with rage and humiliation. The truth had destroyed her narrative in minutes. After the meeting, dozens approached me. Some shook my hand. Others shared stories of standing up to bullies. The reporter interviewed me, Arthur, and Truth Squad members. "This will make a powerful story," she said. "Communities need to know they can fight back." As people filed out, I noticed Barbara sitting alone, staring at nothing. Her lawyer had left. Her supporters evaporated. She looked small, defeated, vulnerable. For a moment, I almost felt sorry. Then I remembered Florence being threatened, Tom losing thousands, all the families she'd harassed. Justice isn't always comfortable, but it's necessary. Tomorrow, the eviction notice would be served. Barbara would have 30 days to vacate. The truth was finally free. Walking out that night felt surreal. The storm clouds had cleared. revealing stars scattered across the sky. People stopped me in the parking lot, thanking me, sharing their relief. One elderly woman grabbed my hand. "You saved our community," she said. But the community had saved itself. Every person who documented harassment, every neighbor who refused intimidation, every Truth Squad member who showed up, that defeated Barbara. Not me. Not Arthur. Ordinary people refusing to accept extraordinary abuse. The story spread beyond Pelican Bay. The newspaper article went viral. I received emails from people across the country dealing with HOA nightmares. I replied, sharing what I'd learned. Document everything. Know your rights. Build community support. Never let bullies make you feel like the problem for defending yourself. Barbara disappeared by month's end, leaving unpaid bills and a damaged mansion. The property management estimated $8,000 in damages. Some battles you win financially. Others, you win by removing the problem. New tenants moved in during October, a young family who integrated immediately, volunteering for cleanups and attending meetings. Winter came to Pelican Bay. Standing on my dock with morning coffee, watching sunrise over water, I understood something grandfather tried teaching me. Property isn't just ownership. It's stewardship, understanding that what we have today, we hold in trust for tomorrow. Barbara had forgotten that, treating everything as something to exploit, and that philosophy destroyed her. But Pelican Bay endured. The morning after the town council meeting, Pelican Bay woke to something it hadn't felt in 14 months. Genuine peace. The sunrise painted the water in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in over a year, nobody was filing false complaints or threatening lawsuits. The bay itself seemed to breathe easier, as if nature itself recognized the shift from chaos to calm. But Barbara Wellington wasn't finished yet. Cornered animals often lash out most dangerously in their final moments, and Barbara proved no exception to this universal truth. Friday morning, Arthur personally served the eviction notice at her mansion, arriving at 9 o'clock, sharp with his briefcase and decades of legal experience. According to his later account, she'd opened the door wearing yesterday's clothes. Mascara smeared down her cheeks, looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. The confident queen from the council meeting had completely vanished, replaced by someone desperate, defeated, and rapidly unraveling. "You can't do this to me," she'd said, her voice cracking with desperation. "I have rights. I'll sue everyone involved in this conspiracy. The county, the town, you, that man, everyone. I'll take everything you have and destroy your reputations." Arthur, with the patience of someone who'd practiced law for 5 decades and seen every variety of human response to accountability, simply handed her the official paperwork. "Ma'am, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. The lease violations are thoroughly documented and witnessed by multiple parties. I strongly suggest you consult with competent legal counsel about your extremely limited options." Barbara's options were, objectively speaking, absolutely terrible. The district attorney had officially filed criminal charges for attempted bribery of a public official, a serious felony carrying potential prison time. Commissioner Hayes' testimony was devastating, backed by physical evidence, the envelope containing $5,000 cash that Barbara had foolishly left as evidence of her crime. Expensive. Minneapolis lawyer had withdrawn from all representation after discovering he'd been systematically lied to about basic facts in the case. No reputable attorney wanted to touch a case involving documented bribery, multiple lease violations, and a client with a well-established history of not paying legal bills. The criminal defense attorney she eventually hired, a barely competent recent graduate desperate for any clients, regardless of their ability to pay, quickly realized he was in over his head. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from multiple angles, sworn statements from numerous witnesses, physical evidence carefully preserved, financial records showing the pattern of debt, and legal threats spanning years. There was no real defense to mount, only damage control and plea negotiations. Meanwhile, the Truth Squad had evolved into something more permanent and meaningful. What started as a desperate response to harassment had become a genuine community organization with real structure. Patricia officially registered us as the Pelican Bay Community Association, a legitimate homeowners group based on actual property ownership and democratic principles rather than intimidation and manufactured authority. Our first official meeting drew 43 property owners, nearly everyone around the Bay. We established actual community standards based on mutual respect, real guidelines about property maintenance and noise levels, but with reasonable enforcement procedures and proper appeal processes. No more arbitrary fines or fake violations manufactured to generate income, just neighbors working together to preserve what made Pelican Bay special. Tom from the marina proposed a community watch program, not to harass innocent people but to genuinely look out for each other's welfare. Florence, despite being 92 years old, volunteered to coordinate the program with characteristic enthusiasm. If anyone tried pulling Barbara-style tactics again, they'd face an organized response. The regional newspaper published a comprehensive feature article titled "Small Town Stands Up to HOA Tyranny and Wins." The reporter had done excellent investigative work, interviewing dozens of residents, carefully examining the legal documents, and explaining step by step how communities could protect themselves from similar abuse. The story was picked up by national media outlets within days. My phone didn't stop ringing for 2 solid weeks. News outlets wanted exclusive interviews. Legal aid organizations wanted to use our case as a teaching example in seminars. Other communities, dealing with HOA nightmares, wanted practical advice about fighting back. I tried helping everyone I could, always emphasizing the same crucial points. Document everything meticulously with dates and times. Know your property rights inside and out. Research local and state laws thoroughly. Build community support before confronting abusers. Never let bullies isolate you from allies. One call particularly stood out in my memory. A woman from Arizona, crying uncontrollably as she described years of systematic harassment from her HOA board. They'd fined her $6,000 for painting her front door the wrong shade of beige according to arbitrary standards. Her husband had recently died. She was surviving on a fixed income, and the HOA was actively threatening foreclosure on her home. I connected her with Arthur, who agreed to review her case pro bono. Turns out, her HOA had violated multiple state regulations governing such organizations. Within 2 months, the fines were completely dismissed and 3 board members resigned under pressure. That's what this was really about. Not just my personal fight with Barbara Wellington, but empowering people everywhere to stand up to abuse disguised as legitimate authority. Back at Pelican Bay, Barbara's final days were pathetic and increasingly desperate. She'd stopped paying utilities, and the power company shut off her electricity after repeated warnings. She'd stopped answering the door entirely, communicating only through angry emails that became increasingly unhinged. One rambling email accused me of being part of a vast conspiracy involving the county government, the media, and somehow even the federal government's highest levels. Another claimed she had irrefutable evidence I'd forged the trust documents, though she never produced this mythical evidence, despite multiple requests. Arthur responded to each email with calm, professional legal language, which seemed to infuriate Barbara further. The property management company conducted a required inspection 2 weeks before the eviction deadline. The damage was shocking, even to experienced property managers. Holes punched in walls throughout the house. Broken fixtures in multiple bathrooms. Stains on carpets that would require complete replacement. Barbara had systematically destroyed the place out of pure spite and rage. $8,000 in estimated damages became $15,000 in documented repair costs. We'd be pursuing civil action to recover damages. But realistically, collecting from someone with Barbara's disastrous financial situation was highly unlikely. Still, the judgment would follow her permanently, making it significantly harder to rent or buy property elsewhere. Small consolation for the extensive damage, but better than nothing. Janet organized a community cleanup day for after Barbara left. 27 people volunteered to help restore the mansion to its former glory. Local businesses donated supplies generously. Tom offered his handyman services at cost. That's what community means. Not forced compliance to arbitrary rules, but genuine people helping each other voluntarily because it's the right thing to do. Barbara's actual departure was anticlimactic. She left on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before the eviction deadline, hiring a cheap moving company that arrived at dawn. I watched from my deck as they loaded her belongings. Fewer than I expected. Apparently, she'd sold off furniture and decorations to pay mounting bills. She didn't look toward my property once. Didn't acknowledge the neighbors who'd gathered to ensure she actually left. Just climbed into her car, a luxury sedan that probably cost more than many people's annual income, and drove away without looking back. No farewell speech, no final threats, no dramatic scene. Just gone, like a bad dream fading with morning light. The criminal case proceeded quickly through the system. Barbara's attorney negotiated a plea deal to avoid trial. She'd plead guilty to attempted bribery, receive 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, and a permanent criminal record. She'd also be permanently barred from serving on any HOA board or property management position anywhere. The judge accepted the deal, but added pointed comments about abuse of authority and the critical importance of community standards based on respect rather than intimidation and fear. I attended the sentencing hearing personally. Barbara looked small in the courtroom. Nothing like the imperious figure who'd terrorized our bay for months. When asked if she had anything to say, she mumbled something unconvincing about being misunderstood, and claimed she'd only tried helping the community improve itself. The judge cut her off sharply. "Ma'am, the evidence shows systematic harassment, financial manipulation, and attempted corruption of public officials. This isn't about misunderstanding. This is about choices you made repeatedly, despite multiple opportunities to change course." Walking out of that courthouse, I felt something release in my chest. Not joy exactly. Barbara's fall was too pathetic for celebration. But relief. Justice had been served appropriately. The abuse had ended permanently. Our community was safe. The mansion cleanup became an unexpected community event. Music played from portable speakers. Someone brought a grill and made burgers. Kids ran around the yard playing while adults scrubbed, painted, and repaired. The work was hard, but the atmosphere felt like a celebration. Florence sat in a lawn chair directing operations like a general commanding troops, occasionally shouting advice or corrections. "Your grandfather would be proud," she told me during a break. "He built this place for families. You protected it. That means something." Janet worked alongside me, scrubbing walls and laughing at my terrible painting technique. We'd started dating officially after the council meeting, bonding over shared battle scars and appreciation for proper documentation. Turns out fighting tyranny together is great foundation for a relationship. By late afternoon, the mansion looked presentable. Not perfect, but honest and clean, ready for a family that would appreciate it. The new tenants arrived on the 1st of November. The Morrison family, James and Sarah with 2 kids, aged 7 and 9. James worked remotely as a software developer. Sarah was a teacher at the elementary school. They'd been searching for affordable bay housing for 2 years. When I showed them the property, Sarah actually cried. "This is perfect," she said. "We'll take care of it, I promise." The kids immediately ran to explore the yard, laughing and pointing at birds. That sound, innocent joy, was exactly what the mansion needed after Barbara's toxic presence. Over the following weeks, the Morrisons integrated beautifully. They attended community meetings, volunteered for the cleanup initiative. Their kids played with other Bay children. This was what grandfather had envisioned. Families enjoying nature, building memories, becoming part of something larger than themselves. The other trust properties were occupied by similar families. Retirees who'd lived here for decades, young couples starting out, a single father raising 2 daughters, all paying reasonable rent, all treated with respect, all contributing to community life. That's what ethical property management looks like. My own life changed in unexpected ways. The media attention led to speaking opportunities about property rights and community organizing. I started consulting with other communities facing HOA abuse, helping them understand legal options and build effective resistance. The work felt meaningful in ways emergency medicine never quite had. Janet and I moved in together by Christmas, combining her cottage with mine to create space for her extensive library and my grandfather's woodworking equipment. We talked about marriage, about children, about building the kind of life grandfather would have appreciated. Honest work, genuine community. Standing up for what's right. Florence passed away peacefully in her sleep that winter, age 9. At her funeral, dozens of people shared stories of her kindness, her sharp wit, her absolute refusal to tolerate nonsense from anyone. She'd stood up to Barbara when others were afraid. She'd showed us all what courage looked like. We scattered her ashes in the bay at sunset, a small ceremony that felt exactly right. As the sun painted everything gold and the water carried her away, I thought about legacy. Florence had left hers in the people she'd inspired and the community she'd protected. Grandfather had left his in property and trust. Yes, but more importantly in values and vision. Even Barbara, in her own twisted way, had left a legacy. She'd united a community, taught us the importance of documentation and organization, showed us that bullies only win when good people stay silent. Not the legacy she'd intended, but perhaps the one she'd earned. Spring came to Pelican Bay, bringing renewal. The Mauricean kids planted a garden. Tom upgraded the marina with community fundraising. Patricia organized a summer festival. Life moved forward, carrying us toward futures we couldn't fully imagine. Standing on my dock one April morning, coffee in, and watching sunrise over water reflecting infinite possibility, I understood something profound. This wasn't just about defeating one bad person. It was about what happens next, about building systems, preventing about creating communities based on respect rather than fear. The bay stretched before me, peaceful and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Barbara was serving community service, dealing with consequences, hopefully learning something. I didn't wish her harm. I wished her growth, understanding, maybe redemption, though I doubted her capacity for it. But that wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was here. Protecting what grandfather built, supporting families calling this home, standing ready to help others facing similar battles, because tyranny always returns wearing different faces. Vigilance isn't paranoia. It's wisdom. The lessons resonated beyond our bay. Documentation beats intimidation. Knowing rights is the first step toward defending them. Community solidarity overcomes bullies. Standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Janet called from inside about coffee. I turned from the bay. From battles won, turned toward warmth and love and choices, building a good life. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Today, Pelican Bay was at peace. The Pelican Bay Community Association now served 60 properties with We'd helped 3 other communities establish similar organizations. National attention had faded, but the work continued. I thought about Barbara occasionally. Some people never change, never develop self-awareness for growth, but I hoped she'd stopped hurting others. We don't always get closure. Sometimes people disappear, and we never know if justice taught them anything. But we protect communities anyway. We build better systems anyway. We stand up anyway. Because silence enables abuse. Florence had taught me that before she passed. Evil triumphs when good people do nothing. Now you know it too. Pass it on. So I would, through consulting, through the association, through our example, Janet and I were planning our fall wedding here at the Bay. Simple ceremony. Just family, friends, community. We'd plant a tree for Florence, something that would grow and provide shade for generations. The coffee was getting cold. The sun had fully risen. Another perfect day at Pelican Bay stretched ahead. I walked inside, where Janet was making pancakes. Simple moments, simple joys, hard-won peace. This was victory. Not defeating Barbara specifically, but creating space for good people to live well. That's what communities should do. That's what grandfather's trust had always been about. That's what I'd fought to preserve. Standing in my kitchen with the woman I loved, planning our future in a community we'd helped save, I knew it had all been worth it. Every difficult moment, every confrontation, every hour, documenting and organizing. Worth it. Because Pelican Bay was at peace. And that peace would last as long as good people remained vigilant, remained organized, remained willing to stand up when it mattered. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but today, we'd won, and that was enough.